Preface. Marcus Aurelius is one of the best recorded individuals from antiquity. Even his face became more than usually familiar. The imperial coinage displayed his portrait for over 40 years, from the clean-shaven young heir of Antoninus to the war-weary, heavily bearded ruler who died at his post in his late 50s. For his childhood and early youth we depend largely on anecdote and reconstruction. Then in the correspondence of his tutor Fronto, spanning nearly 3 decades, we have a series of vivid and revealing glimpses into the family life and preoccupations of Marcus and the court. But what made Marcus Aurelius a household name was the private notebook that he kept in his last 10 years, the Meditations. The philosopher in the purple has never lacked admirers, ancient or modern. Critics are hard to find, although the author of the Historia Augusta was able to invent a notable one in his fictional life of Avidius Cassius. Gibbon, in 1783, paid sober tribute to a man, severe to himself, indulgent to the imperfection of others, just and beneficent to all mankind. 80 years later, Matthew Arnold, inspired by reading a New English version of the Meditations, was unrestrained. The acquaintance of a man like Marcus Aurelius is an imperishable benefit. Marcus was, perhaps, the most beautiful figure in history. Besides him, history presents one or two other sovereigns eminent for their goodness, such as Saint Louis or Alfred. But Marcus Aurelius has, for us moderns, this great superiority in interest over Saint Louis or Alfred, that he lived and acted in a state of society modern by its essential characteristics, in an epoch akin to our own, in a brilliant center of civilization. By its accents of emotion, the morality of Marcus Aurelius acquires a special character. His sentences find their way to the soul. It is this very admixture of sweetness with his dignity which makes him so beautiful a moralist. It enables him to carry even into his observation of nature a delicate penetration, a sympathetic tenderness, worthy of Wordsworth. Walter Pater made the hero of his novel, Marius the Epicurean, 1885, who became the emperor's secretary, a peg on which to hang a set elaborate essays on Antonine Rome, in which the serene Aurelius figures prominently. Meanwhile, Ernest Renan devoted the 8th and last volume of his Histoire des Origines du Christianisme to Marcus, and the end of the ancient world. Christianity receives much more attention than the emperor I. Preface 9 his pages, and he was at pains to defend the reputation of the beautiful and fertile Faustina and to discuss the paradox of Marcus Degenerate et Commodus. Gibbon could not use Fronto's letters. Arnold was interested almost solely in the Meditations. But Gibbon, Pater and Renan alike, it is unfortunate, swallowed whole the fictional parts of the Historia Augusta. The unmasking of the author of that curious work was to begin with Hermann Dessau in 1889, and the task of decontaminating the source continues. Spurious items, notably from the Aelius and Avidius Cassius, still infect serious scholarship. My own approach to Marcus began with the Marcomannic Wars, under the guidance of Sir Ronald Sim, whose first advice to me was to read Dessau's fundamental study of the Ha. If Marcus seemed modern to a mid-Victorian, he might seem less so now. Yet the wars, which were the catalyst for the Meditations, shattered that charmed, golden, civilized Antonine tranquility. The invasions of Italy and Greece by northern barbarians marked the end of an era. Marcus was in Central Europe, recall 1914-18, it may be claimed. And, whatever the intentions of the artists who portrayed the campaigns on the Aurelian column, the horror and pathos they evoke match the mood of the Meditations, in which war is scarcely mentioned. I first published a book on Marcus 20 years ago, Marcus Aurelius, Aaron Spottiswoode, London, Little Brown, Boston, 1966, now long out of print. Readers will wish to know its relationship to the present work. I have retained the structure and much of the text. The appendices, notes, bibliography and illustrations are entirely new. Considerable parts of each chapter have been amended and enlarged. I have benefited a great deal from the work of others, registered in the notes and in Appendix 1. The complex web of family connections which formed the Antonine dynasty is now much better understood, although there is room for debate, and the order of birth of the numerous children of Marcus and Faustina, at least 14, is now better known. These details are summarized in Appendix 2 and the 6th Demeter. I have taken into account recent research on the Greek intellectual renaissance, on Fronto, and on the emerging Christians, Appendix 4. There has been some welcome new epigraphic evidence for the wars, Appendix 3. But I must stress that this is a biography, not a life and times. I have seen my task as the simple one of recording Marcus' life as accurately as possible, setting him in his context, and allowing him to speak for himself, especially in chapter 10. If this helps readers of the Meditations to understand their author better, I shall be content. No one can write a book of this kind without incurring a multitude of debts. I hope that what I owe to published work is properly registered in the notes and bibliography, but I should like to pay special tribute to C.R. Haynes and A.S.L. Farquharson. 4 of those whose help I gratefully acknowledged 20 years back are now gone, but not forgotten: Donald Dudley, John Morris, Hans Geo. Preface 10 Flaum, Eric Swoboda. I continue to benefit from the advice and encouragement of Geza Alfoldi, Eric Burley, Yaroslav Sassal, Armand Stylo and Ronald Sim. Anthony Burley, Manchester, the 10th of June 1986. Note to paperback impression: I have taken the opportunity afforded by a reprint to add a list of recent publications,